Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here, and welcome to another DCEU Daily, but this is a special one because this morning I'm reacting to what Warner Bros. Chairman has said about the future of the DCEU, and then is the massive rant about how Superman and Batman ranked in the Justice League test screenings, and how this angers me, not because I feel that Batman and Superman are actually unpopular, but it's been spun that way, which look, it's despicable. But first, let's see what Toby Emmerich had to say about the future of the DCEU. We all feel like we've turned a corner now, Warner Bros. Pictures Group Chairman Toby Emmerich told The Hollywood Reporter. We're playing by the DC playbook, which is very different than the Marvel playbook. We are far less focused on a shared universe. We take it one movie at a time. Each movie is its own equation, an own creative entity. If you had to say one thing about us, it's that it always has to be about the directors. Yes, there's been incidents in the DCEU where Warner Brothers have kind of interfered with a couple of movies, and I understand that, and I understand my fellow DCEU fans' frustrations. But if you look at Warner Brothers' long history, they do have a history of backing the director more than Disney have ever done. So that's what he's actually talking about there. And moving forward from Aquaman, going forward, they will totally let the director do what his vision wants. His or her vision needs to be done. So that's what he's trying to say there. So let's see what else has been said. There are at least a couple of DC directors who might disagree with Emmerich on that last point. Marvel Studios will also say that it focuses one movie at a time while building cinematic universes. No, BatmanNews.com. Marvel can't say that. They don't focus on one film at a time. It's more about the universe than the film. How many generic, pointless films have they made that you watch and you never watch again? That's because they're focusing on the universe rather than the individual movies. So, yeah, stop it. So the chairman of the studio has, while building a cinema, but that's not really the point here. The chairman of the studio has effectively said what's been suspected and reported on ever since the box office failure of Justice League. Warner Bros. Will focus on individual films franchise going forward. WB's rationale is easy enough to figure out, considering the financial performance of all films in the current DC era. Justice League was supposed to be the studio's big payoff, crossing over several heroes capable of headlining their own films. It should have been the studio's highest grossing DCEU film, as Marvel's Avengers series tops the MCU, but instead, Justice League 657.9 is at the very bottom of the DCEU global rankings. The standalone Aquaman is the highest grossing DC-based film in over 6 years. Aquaman will eventually pass The Dark Knight Rises as the top worldwide earner for all DC movies of any era. Wonder Woman, another standalone film, ranks third globally in the DCEU, but tops the domestic charts. Yeah, I love Wonder Woman, actually prefer Wonder Woman to Aquaman, but you know, forget domestic. Domestic means nothing to me. It's what a film makes altogether. That's interesting. Warner Bros. Probably would have seen better results from Justice League had the studio built to it properly, but the studio doesn't need to worry about what could have been. Warner Bros. Will worry about potential later in favour of the actual success it's experiencing right now by leaving DC heroes on their own instead of bringing them together. Right, so let's break this down, because I think sometimes these sites, and I like BatmanNews.com, but all these sites are the same. They add 2 and 2 and they make 5. So it's a great headline, isn't it? The success of Aquaman means that we're going to be more focused on the films and less focused on a universe. That doesn't mean there's never going to be a Justice League. They will go where the money is, right? But listen, they understand that, listen, I think they thought, let's just copy Marvel. Let's do what they do. Let's copy their blueprint. Rush, rush, rush. Let's do this. That's why they did Batman v Superman. Unfortunately, Zack Snyder had one idea how to execute this universe, and they had another. And that's the problem. You can't work with people if you're not on the same train and you're both going on different directions. You can disagree, that's fine. but there's got to be some agreement where you're heading. And this was the problem with the first part of the DCEU. As much as I love what Zack did, he wanted to do one thing and they wanted to do another. And ultimately, they own DC. They own these heroes. So it's their prerogative what direction they go in. But once Snyder was there, they should have given him the freedom he needed. The problem was they took on Christopher Nolan, and it was his decision to bring in Snyder, not theirs. It wasn't a decision they were ever comfortable with. They should have knocked it on the head from the beginning. Now, that would have been a shame for me because I love Zack Snyder. But at the end of the day, if a studio isn't confident in a creative, then they shouldn't be working with him in the first place. That's just my opinion. So basically, what they're saying, what we knew anyway, that, you know, they were burnt with Justice League. There won't be a Justice League movie anytime soon. Listen, let's be honest here, what he's pretty much saying, listen, don't expect loads and loads of crossovers and things like that. We are going to focus on the character movies. We're going to let the directors do their thing. But let's flip it. Walter Hamada's first, movie is really Shazam. It is. Shazam is a New Line Cinema production as well as a Warner Brothers and the DC one, right? Walter Hamada originates from New Line Cinema. David F. Sandberg is from New Line Cinema. Let's look at this movie, right? And don't forget, I've seen a test screening. When we look at let's talk about the trailers. I can't talk about the film, but let's talk about the trailers, right? The trailer shows loads of newspaper clippings of Superman and Batman, the Battle of Metropolis, lots of things. They literally frame Batman toys, in this. So there's loads of references in that film. So I want to make it abundantly clear to you not to get carried away by it if you like the shared universe thing. There will always be name drops. There will always be connective links to these universes. The DCEU is the DCEU. It's still one thing. It's still one entity. The films are still connected. I don't want you to misunderstand that. What he means is it isn't going to be like Marvel where you're going to get characters from each film coming into other films and things like that. They're going to focus on the piece. And you know what? Well done. Well done. I totally agree with Toby. A round of applause for coming out and saying this. You know what? We're going to be different. Because over on my Instagram, Geektastic555, I actually was talking to people and making a few videos about individuality. The one reason the DCEU has been slaughtered from the very beginning is for being individual. And then with Justice League, it sacrificed its individuality. Being individual is one of the bravest things you'll ever do, whether you're making films or in your real actual life. And the DCEU are slaughtered by Marvel fans and other fans because they can't understand individuality. What we saw from Zack Snyder was films with individuality. And Warner Brothers were afraid by that, and that's why they tried to mess with them. I can't blame them from a business standpoint. But now Warner Brothers are saying, do you know what? We were doing the right thing all along, and we're going to go back to that. And actually, this is great news for us Snyder fans as well. Listen, I don't want you to misunderstand me again. I'm a Zack Snyder fan, but I'm a bigger fan of DC and Batman and Superman and the catalogue of characters. But I'm still fighting for the Snyder Cut. I assure you it will happen. We keep on talking about it, but in positive ways. As I say, slaughtering Warner Brothers for Justice League and what they did to Air with Suicide Squad it's there. It's there for everyone to see. And even Warner Brothers are now admitting what they did was wrong. By Toby coming out and saying that, even he's admitting what happened with Suicide Squad, even with Batman v Superman, with Zack not allowed to have his 3-hour cut as a theatrical cut. What happened with Justice League with Zack being removed? They're admitting it now. They're basically saying we're going back to what we were doing before. This is great news for the Snyder Cut. So really, I want you going out there, saying, wow, he's saying it's about the directors again, that it's about the film rather than the franchise. This is great news. This shouldn't be a negative. I've seen a couple of people trying to be negative because the guy talked about always supporting directors. It's no secret. It's no secret that they messed with a couple of films within the DCEU. But now they've publicly come out and said, you know what? Not anymore. We're going back to backing our directors and making one film at a time, and that's brilliant. But on the other hand, I'll repeat to you, and I think it does need to be repeated these days because people just go along with the negative narrative. This doesn't mean you will not have cameos. This doesn't mean you won't have kind of Easter eggs from the other DCEU films. So don't worry. It's still a shared universe, but they will not be focusing on other movies within that movie. That's what he's trying to say. Like it's like with Avengers 2, isn't it? When you get that, when Thor has that weird flash about what's going on Asgard. That's what he's trying to say. We're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be focusing on the film that you're watching. And I think that's important. And the DC playbook is different to the Marvel playbook because DC is such a dramatically different universe. And that's great. Marvel do their thing. We do our thing. Everybody's happy. And I think that's the best thing. Trying to copy Marvel was never going to work because they tried to copy Marvel by dumping a director, bringing in another director and forcing him to work with that other director already done with reshooting a few scenes. That was never going to work and then hopefully create a Marvel type universe going forward. They tried, they failed, they knew they failed, and they're going back to what serves them best because Aquaman is totally 100% a director-driven film, focused on that film and that character's universe, and that works. So that's brilliant news, and I'm really happy about that we're going to focus with the director's vision, those character movies, you know, with a few kind of Easter eggs, like what they're doing with Shazam. Right. This is when I get really angry and really upset. So, past couple of days, we've seen reports from Screen Rant that someone who works for a company that runs test screenings for Warner Brothers has been talking about certain things that happen within the test screenings, that talking about Snyder's plan and what he was going to do next and how he wanted more individual films before the Justice League movie. First of all, test screening bloke, how would you actually know that? I accept that you know where Batman and Superman ranked when test audiences saw Justice League, but how do you know Zack Snyder's plan? So please stick with the information you know and don't make up nonsense just to get yourself on a podcast. Right, I've said that. That's my one point. Now, everyone, fans and sites have decided, because Superman and Batman were ranked at the bottom two of Justice League characters from test audiences, people are trying to now say that Batman and Superman are not very popular anymore. So what's the Twitter account I keep on seeing now and I follow? Flickcast made this big monologue saying, it seems now that smaller characters are more popular than bigger characters. No, no, no. Those audiences voted The Flash, Cyborg, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman higher than Batman and Superman because they enjoyed them more in the movie, the Justice League. It doesn't mean they're actually less popular all round. You know that, and I know that. So stop bullshitting. Stop trying to make something. Stop trying to shine a light in a dark room when it isn't totally dark. Batman and Superman are very popular characters. Now, I don't know if Warner Brothers have got this guy to do this podcast to try and put it out there that, well, Batman and Superman aren't very popular anymore. I don't know, right? Or if he's just saying it to be controversial. Was there any need to even reveal this information now? What does it do? It seems to me every time we get to a positive narrative, someone has to take us back to suicide, you know, to kind of, what's it called? There's actually a street, right? Yeah, right. So we get to the positive bit, but then we get taken back to Suicide Slums in Metropolis, right? Which is a place in DC Comics, right? Why? Why do we keep on doing this? I know, it gets clicks and it gets views and you get people subscribing to you if you talk about these kind of negative narratives all the time. But for me, it's so wrong to kind of say, because Batman and Superman were the least popular characters in Justice League, this actually makes them the least popular characters all round now. It doesn't. It was just the way they were represented in Justice League. You know that. Stop lying. You are lying. People love Batman and Superman. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man and Wonder Woman are still the most popular superheroes. They're the comics that still sell. It's as simple as that. Yes, the other characters are great, but Batman, Superman, Spider-Man and Wonder Woman will always be the most iconic and the most popular heroes. So stop making up lies. I don't care anymore about what was going to happen with the DCEU. We all know, and it would have been awesome, and I'm sorry for Zack, but it's happened now, and we must move forward. We move forward by fighting for the Snyder Cut, but looking forward to the future of the DCEU. So, in closing, Batman and Superman are extremely popular, still awesome, so stop spreading your poison. Well, you can, but just because you say something doesn't make it true.